It was called Operation Babylift. And I remember painfully that big cargo plane, a C-5A, taking off from Saigon loaded with babies, Vietnamese orphans, and then crashing minutes later. That crash devastated the hopeful beginnings of America's evacuation effort. It was initiated right in the White House. Tom Jarrell is here, and Tom, you were ABC's White House correspondent at the time.
Hugh, I remember very well President Ford making the announcement in the White House briefing room. It was an announcement of sanity and reason during the final stages of a war that really didn't have much of either.
No. And there was a real warm glow of feeling in America, I think, over Operation Babylift, and then, of course, the shock of the crash.
We have to remember half those babies survived, and they made it to new homes in the West. For them, since then, life has been one long battle. This is the untold story, Hugh, of what those kids have been through since the horrors of the crash. Their story actually begins with a war just as it was ending.
The Vietnam experience. Who were they fighting? What were they fighting for?
Vietnam is not a war we can easily forget. TV ads bombard us with powerful images now used to sell war histories.
So call toll-free and take another look at the Vietnam experience.
Public television documentaries bring back old memories. But one important chapter has faded from public awareness. Do you remember these kids, the children of Vietnam, many orphaned in a long and bloody conflict? Today, 9 years later, some of the smallest war victims are involved in legal warfare against the very government that wanted to save them. They're survivors of an airlift that misfired. Some of those orphans are caught up in an ongoing tragedy involving a former president, a defective plane, a major corporation, the U.S. Air Force, and a battle against brain damage. Little An was one of them.
I just had some of my brain cells were crushed. That's all.
Crushed brain cells. Why An today and scores of other orphans may be brain damaged is what this 2020 investigation is all about. April 1975, the last month of the Vietnam War. The Ford administration announces Operation Babylift, a humanitarian effort to rescue Vietnamese orphans. In Saigon, Ambassador Graham Martin reportedly calls it marvelous propaganda, which could be useful to persuade a reluctant Congress to vote more arms money to keep the war going.
These 2,000 Vietnamese orphans are all in the process of being adopted by American families. This is the least we can do, and we will do much, much more.
In Saigon, American child care agencies are desperately trying to find a plane to evacuate their orphans. The president comes up with the very symbol of American power, the world's largest airplane already bound for Saigon.
I have directed that C-5A aircraft and other aircraft especially equipped to care for these orphans during the flight be sent to Saigon.
It took that presidential order for the Air Force to assign the Lockheed-built C-5A Galaxy, embroiled for years in controversy. Huge vehicles could roll through its giant cargo doors when they worked. The locking system frequently malfunctioned. In 1971, an Air Force report even called it a monster system that could lead to a catastrophe. A successful rescue mission would bolster the plane's image. But as we will see, this cargo plane was not especially equipped. But others nearby were. ABC News has learned there were 4 fully equipped medical planes in the Philippines, which could have been used but weren't.
We had a 141 on the ground and 3 DC-9s, which were medical birds.
Phil Wise, a sergeant in the Medical Corps, was on the C-5A. He was briefed on how the mission was supposed to end.
We knew that President Ford was going to meet us at Travis Air Force Base and grab the first baby. And it was like a big publicity deal then, but unfortunately it didn't work out that way.
That's why this C-5A, number 8218, was dubbed the President's plane. At 12:35 p.m. it arrived in Saigon. Its huge cargo doors opened to unload howitzers and other weapons of war. Its new cargo, babies, were loaded on board. A total of 248 children, many fathered by American GIs. Nurse Christine Lieberman was on the flight.
We went up several flights of stairs to get to the top section of the plane. Upstairs, there were not enough seats in the plane. Many of the children were 2 children to a seat.
I was taking care of 2 aisles of children, and on one side there were 6 infants and 3 seats. The babies just kept filling on up.
Downstairs, the older kids and the adults had to make do on blankets stretched out on the steel floor. Cargo straps substituted for seat belts.
They were pretty scary, too.
Among the children was Levo.
I was on the bottom of the floor of the airplane. A lot of us were crying.
Children screaming, hollering, carrying on. Children aren't cargo. Children are people. They belong in seats. They don't belong on the floor.
More than 150 people were crowded into the barely lit hold for what was to be a 20-hour flight. There were no life rafts downstairs, no toilet facilities, not enough air sickness bags, which would quickly be needed. What's worse, there was virtually no oxygen for emergencies. Oxygen might have been added, as it was to this other cargo plane, but it wasn't.
There wasn't any type of fallout mask given to us, and we were just without oxygen.
The flight crew did their best to hurry things along, to keep plane 80-218 to a schedule and a rendezvous with the president. On the flight deck, even before takeoff, there were doubts about this plane's suitability. The cockpit recorder taped the crew's concern about exactly what would soon happen. In the actual audio tape obtained by 2020, the crew discussed taking a high-altitude flight.
Yeah, but then you get the problems of, if you're up at 370 and we have a rapid decompression, you're going to lose compression if it happens.
They noted the lack of emergency oxygen, saying without it, they ain't going to get them all out in time.
Those babies, they ain't going to get them all out in time. Load master, do not stop the operation. Do not. QUIC, clear for takeoff. Crew take. Ready.
It was 4:03 p.m. The giant C-5A, number 80-218, took off. 12 minutes later, the nightmare began.
I was in the galley in the rear of the plane, filling up baby bottles, and there was a loud explosion.
Just a loud explosion all at once, and I looked back and saw the doors falling off like they really never was attached, and blankets and debris flying throughout the aircraft, bodies flying, tumbling, and a lot of screaming.
At 23,772 feet, 4 miles high, the door locking system fails. These drawings suggest what happened. The huge rear door falls off, leaving a gaping hole.
Thoughts of a crash landing were in my mind.
At that point, I just assumed that we were all going to die.
There was an explosive decompression. The flying door severed the control cables. The air inside the plane was sucked out. There was no oxygen at that altitude.
And our crew members that were back there at the time, they all went out the aircraft at that time.
You saw some personnel actually sucked out of the airplane.
I sure did.
Within seconds, Phil Wise and the others in the cargo hold passed out. He described it like suffocating.
Well, I felt like I was gasping for air and could not get air.
It hurt really a lot. It just like, I don't know, I can't really describe it. It's just that I couldn't stand the pain anymore, both ears.
Upstairs, some of the babies get very quiet.
I put a mask on as many children as I could, although there were twice as many children as there were masks.
The masks in my section of the aircraft disintegrated in my hands. They fell apart. I found one mask that worked, and I used that mask for myself, and I shared it with a baby who was turning very blue.
The kids were passing out. The children, at the time of descent, were unconscious.
I was reassured. I was told, don't worry. This happens to these airplanes all the time, and everything comes out okay.
The pilot, with only control of the engines left, turns the plane around, heading back towards Saigon. This is the very route he flew, as shown in this Air Force film. Just 2 miles from the runway, the plane crash-landed here, as these tire tracks show, at 309 miles an hour, twice the speed of a normal landing. The plane couldn't stop, bounced back into the air, crossed the Saigon River, and hit an embankment. The wings went one way, the tail another.
My ear came off completely. It was sewn back on. My back was broken in 4 places.
They found me hanging upside down with my leg twisted around the wire, my eyeball hanging out, my head laid open, multiple lacerations all over my body.